13 of the Guyana Constitution says, the principal objective of the political system is to establish an inclusionary democracy by providing increasing opportunities for the participation of citizens and their organizations in the management and decision-making processes of the state, with particular emphasis on those areas of decision-making that directly affect their well-being. So it is easy to see from this that when Lindeners organized against the electricity hikes, they were organizing against the fact that they were not meaningfully consulted with, and they were organizing on a matter that directly affected their well-being. As Red Thread in Guyana said, the struggle is basically asking a fundamental question: how will we organize to live? My second point is that whether or not you agree with the original demands made by Lindeners, and again, categorically, I do agree with them, there can be absolutely no excuse for what happened on the first night of those community protests. And thanks to social media, we had images from Facebook. There were a number of young women who put up hundreds of pictures of all women, young women having picnics, cooking on the bridge, singing hymns. You could not tell from any of those pictures that these protesters were disorganized or unruly. And at 6 p.m. on that night of the first of 5 nights, the police waited until it got dark and shot tear gas and rubber pellets and live bullets into a crowd, injuring 20 and killing the 3 men whose lives we're here to remember tonight. There can be absolutely no excuse for that, and that needs to be said across Guyana and across the diaspora and by absolutely everybody. In addition to that, we must also condemn the fact that the government has not properly come out to condemn what has taken place. In fact, its condemnation comes in the form of blaming the victims for what happened to them in Linden. And it has taken 8-10 days for the president of Guyana, who is a president not for his supporters only, are dwindling, as we saw in the last election, but he's a president for all Guyanese. 10 days before President Ramatar announced he was going into Linden. And in what manner did he announce it? Not to say I'm going up there to meet the families of the dead and injured, not to say I'm going up to meet with Lindeners, not to say I'm going up to hear what Lindeners have to say. The statement that he puts out and the statement that is released in the Guyana Chronicle has words like he is ordering the security forces to clear Linden, that the roads must be completely cleared, that he's no longer tolerating this inflammatory language that I believe rightly led Lindeners to block the place again today when the security tried to remove the roadblocks, to say they were prepared to put down their lives because this was complete contempt with which they were being treated. And as many of you will probably know, the president has now postponed that visit to a time and a date that is left to be decided. I presume that Lindeners will allow him to go into the community when he can show some respect for the people of Linden and what they are fighting for. That's the second point I want to make. The third point, and I'm almost finished, the third point I want to make is that whether or not you agree with those original demands, and again, I am one of those who categorically agrees. Oh, I want to say also that in relation to the 3 men who were killed, we have to remember that the last time the police ever opened fire and shot and killed protesters was, does anyone remember? June 16, 1948, when Lalabachi, Rambaran, Puran, Harry, and Dookie were shot at Enmore in 1948. It is not since then that we have had another incident of this nature. So it's important to understand the historical importance of what happened a month after we just commemorated the Enmore martyrs on June 16th. The fourth point, as I said, whether or not you agree with those electricity rate hikes, it is important, people, to educate yourself on the issues. Educate yourself. Do not take what the media, especially the state media, is telling you. When you read the Guyana Chronicle, it is telling you that Lindeners are a bunch of freeloaders. They don't tell you that last year the stats showed that after gold and rice, Linden brought in the 3rd highest level of foreign exchange into the country. This is a community with 70% unemployment. So you have to ask yourself, which private and multinational and government hands is that money going into? Right? So this is a community that is being described as freeloaders, and the people of Guyana are being told that Lindeners are lazy, that they don't want to work, that they're refusing to pay the same electricity rates as the rest of Guyana, and that this is wrong, and they're making it into an issue where Lindeners are simply fighting for something, for a set of privileges that they're not entitled to. Educate yourself on the issues. You don't have to take it from me. Start asking questions. Ask yourself, do Lindeners get electricity from the national grid? The answer is no, but ask those questions. And if they don't get electricity from the national grid, how can we be making the argument about paying the same rates? Ask yourself, what happened to all of the bauxite properties that this government has been selling off? And where have those profits been going? Ask yourself, what happened to the power plant in Linden and why was it allowed to run down? Ask yourself about Bosai, the Chinese company that has come in and won huge concessions. Ask yourself, why is it that the pre-subsidized electricity rate that Bosai is charging Lindeners is so high when Bosai is receiving duty-free concessions for all the fuel that it imports into Guyana? Ask yourself why this Chinese multinational company is allowed to set electricity rates for Lindeners that are not determined by, that are outside of the Public Utilities Commission. Ask yourself all of those questions. Do not take what the state media is giving you. Ask yourself that. It is important to ask yourself that. And one of the things that really upsets me when I see people saying that Lindeners are freeloading and they want to get subsidies. I don't know how many of you all saw the recent figures that were the Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashley Singh, was forced to release this week of the people earning, some of them earning as much as $1 million a month from the office of the president, and asking myself, why is it that Guyanese getting so vexed about Lindeners? This is the last point I want to make about how we divide ourselves from each other. And we divide ourselves so that we're fighting for the crumbs at the bottom, while those at the top are taking home the vast majority of the riches that our country has. And that brings me to my last point, that it is very important to understand that Linden cuts across region, it cuts across race, it cuts across gender. And this is really why I have that sign that says, I stand with Linden, we are all Lindeners. In a statement that I released with other sisters in Red Thread last week, Monday in Guyana, we said that this is not about party, it is not about race, it is not about the big P, the party politics. This is about social and economic justice. This is about rights for people. It's important to recognize this. It is important to recognize, and the government knows this. So you have to ask yourself, why are they playing this divide and rule tactic? Why are they playing these cheap strategies? They know this. They know that Linden has had a long and proud history of independent organizing, independent of any political party, whether it was the PPP, whether it was the PNC, because in the 1970s and 1980s, it was the organization of workers who organized and shut down the bauxite industry. It was those workers who joined with sugar workers to join the Sugar and Bauxite Workers Unity Committee. And there's a sister here from India, Sarah Abraham, who has done work and actually written a book on the racial unity of the working classes during that period and during earlier periods in our country's history. It is important to understand that as I stand here tonight from Canada and ask myself, when in 1983 sugar and bauxite workers came together, when in 1989 bauxite workers again lent support to sugar, where is GAU in this? Why has GAU not even issued a statement condemning the police killing of 3 people, unarmed protesters? Because if the police were injured, you would hear about it. If there was any evidence of people beaten up or shot, you would have heard about it. 10 days after, they can't produce a single thing. So you know for a fact that this was an unarmed, peaceful protest. So we cannot allow people to divide us. We cannot allow these divide and rule tactics to make us forget